today, didn't we?
Yes. Yes.
Just have a smaller room. Small but mighty.
Yeah.
Gotta love this church. Been here since the very beginning. Big rooms, small rooms, you name it, all the different places. But the heart of unity is still right here in this room and right there in Facebook Live. So welcome, everybody. So I'm going to start with a little song that I wrote, and I'm going to intermingle a song that you know. And when we get to the part that you know, feel free to join in.
Okay.
And if you figure out my song, you could join me with that one too. It's not that hard. When callous-hearted people cast their will upon the meek, when the hand of wrath came down on him, he turned the other cheek. When he willingly accepted what appeared to be defeat, he chose love. When he laid his hands upon them, the blind could finally see. Through the power of intention, he could calm the raging seas. But the greatest gift he gave us was the power to be free, to choose love. He chose love. He chose love. Coming through his heart up above. It's the only thing that ever really matters anyway. He chose love. When the wrecking ball swings down, dismantles all I built. When the empire of my ego lies in ruins on the hill. When the doctor's only orders is another bitter pill, I choose love. When I look at my reflection and I don't like what I see, when I realize the world out there is the world inside of me, when the chaos tries to grip me and shatter my beliefs, I choose love. I choose love. I choose love. Coming through my heart up above. It's the only thing that ever really matters anyway. I choose love. All you need is love. All you need is love. All you need is love, 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 love. Love is all you need. Let's hear it now. All you need is love. All you need is love. All you need is love, 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 love. Love is all you need. I like that. Let's do it again. All you need is love. All you need is love. All you need is love, 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 love. Love is all you need. Love, love, love. I choose love. I choose love. I choose love. I choose love. It's the only thing that ever really matters anyway. I choose love. I choose love. I choose love. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yeah, I think we all needed a little touch of that today, didn't we? Kind of feels like we all do. It's kind of crazy what's going on these days. We're watching the world, we're trying to choose love, and we have all these images, and we have all these things going on. And blessings to you, Christine.
Thank you.
Your homeland.
It feels to me like there are so many people in the world that are meditating and praying and supporting the whole universe for peace.
Back up to the first line.
You know, it's a really great thing for me as a Ukrainian American and Ukrainian.
Yes.
Yes.
And we are.
And so great.
And you know, there's blessings everywhere and everything. I've never seen the whole world get together more than we have in recent months. Right? Sometimes that's what it takes to make things happen. So today's talk is I Choose Love, right from the song, right from the concept. And I'll just read you some of the lyrics of the song so that it doesn't disappear on you, because it's really important that we do it. There it is. So the part that really, parts of this that, and you can see how this song is constructed. The first part was obviously about Jesus' example of how in the midst of some horrible scenarios that he chose love, right? And the greatest gift he gave us was the power to do the same. That's the point. The next whole set of verses and chorus in this song is about me making those choices. Yeah, the next whole set of choruses and verses there are all about me taking that example and making those choices in my own life, right? So that's what we're trying to really communicate with this talk. It's when the wrecking ball swings down and dismantles all I've built, when the empire of my ego lies in ruins on the hill, and when the doctor's only orders is another bitter pill, I still get a choice, right? And when I look at my reflection and I don't like what I see, and when I realize that the world out there is the world inside of me, because that's how we think, that's how we believe. We know we are creative beings and creative energy. And we know that as we think and feel, these are the expressions that we see that are drawn to us in our life. We understand the law of attraction. We know how it works. As you think and feel, you create. Everything you see has been created. Everything. There's nothing that hasn't been created. So, and I sometimes have these conversations with my atheist friends. If everything you see has been created, then how can you reconcile on the idea that there is no creator? There has to be. If everything's created, there has to be a creator. So that's and we are co-creators. We know that. We understand that. We're co-creators because we have this divine energy within us. We have the opportunity to create. So when you look at the world, what we're looking at is a collective creation. And as I go through these slides, I'm going to kind of maybe unpack a little bit of that. Why we're creating World War I, World War II, World War III. Why is it that this is our collective creation? And I hope that some of this comes through. I'm not going to say anything I haven't said before. I've actually done this talk before. Truth is truth. There's nothing new about truth. It's always been there. I think it's more important to be repetitive than it is to just come up with new talks all the time. Because it's the repetitive nature of really, think about when you grew up, how that repetition became part of who you are, right? So it takes a lot of recreating, a lot of repetition to really understand what's happening. So Natalie, if you would advance the slide, please.
Absolutely.
I don't know about you, but when I was like 5 years old, and my brother and I would wake up in the middle of the night and go down, sneak down and watch TV, there was this movie called Them. Has anybody ever seen Them? Mm-hmm. Who did? Who said yes? You saw Them? You saw it?
Yeah.
Giant ants. I was terrified. I was 5 years old. I was absolutely terrified of them. But there's kind of a reason they call them them. Them is a strong word. It's a powerful word. And it's not us. It's them. That's what's happening now in the world. Like it or not, there's them. And look, the world would be a better place if it wasn't for them. Have you ever had that thought? We're all thinking that right now, aren't we? That the world would be a better place if it wasn't for them. And before all this Russia stuff, we were still thinking that. Right? Weren't Republicans thinking that about Democrats, and weren't Democrats thinking that about Republicans? Right? Weren't some blacks thinking that about whites, and weren't some whites thinking that about blacks? There's always them in our lives. And what I'm trying to communicate with this message is that it's us. And this is what unity is all about. That's what the word means, unity. But I'm trying to communicate the idea that it's really just us. And they're just a facet of us. We're all just one collective humanity. And until we get that point, there's always going to be us and them. And guess what is created when we live in a world of us and them? War. Arguments, disagreements. It's all stems from that root feeling that the world would be a better place if it wasn't for them. They're ruining everything, right? Now, of course, that puts us on our wonderful high horse because we're great. That's a nice feeling, isn't it? That we're amazing. It's just them. If they wouldn't be like they are, we'd have a better world. That is really puts us in a very nice feeling, pompous place, doesn't it? But we got to get out of that. We have to get out of that. And the people in this room understand that. We know that. This is our doctrine. These are our principles. This is how we live. And I'll be darned if I'm going to let what's going on in the world shake my principles. This is where we have to stand strong, right? Mm-hmm. So let's advance the slides and see where this is going. Two sides to every story. There's the one there's mine, and then there's the one that I'm not going to tell you about, right? Well, turn the news on. Typically, you get one side of a story. Depending on which news, might be one side or the other, but typically you're getting one side of the story, and the other side I'm not going to tell you about. Why? Because that would dilute the energy and power of the message I'm trying to get you to believe. So the power of omission is a very, very powerful tactic in the press these days. And let's face it, we don't know what's going on in the Ukraine. We're not there. We know what we're seeing and hearing. That's what we know. There's a huge filter between what's happening and what we hear and see. And that filter typically has an agenda. It always does. It always does around election time. It does even when you don't even care to think about it. You're getting information through a filter that has an agenda. And that agenda is to influence you into a certain way of thinking and perceiving. Mm-hmm. And unless you fully recognize what you're taking in and understand that this is not what's happening, this is not the truth. This is a communication tool that's sending me a version of the truth as they see it, as they want to see it, as they want to communicate it. So that's important to really understand. Next slide, please. So, the very first principle in unity is that there's only one presence and one power in the universe, and in my life, God the good, omnipotent. Now, this is radical. This thought came out of Myrtle Fillmore and Charles Fillmore back in the late 1800s when unity started. And why is this a radical thought? It seems like it would make sense. It seems like it wouldn't be too contradictory. But the truth is it's very, very radical. Because if you read this statement, you realize that there is no place, no acknowledgement for this so-called Satan, this so-called devil. Fundamental traditional religion has taught about the good and the evil. In fact, next slide, please, In fact, we'll go to the Bible and we'll try to get an understanding about what does it say, because to me it's very contradictory, and this is what you'll see. In Revelations, I am the Alpha and the Omega, says the Lord God, who is and who was and who is to come, the Almighty. You cannot be almighty if there is another power equal to your power. It doesn't make sense. So this statement correlates exactly with our first principle, doesn't it? Only one presence and one power. So does the second one. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. Only one source energy creator. Only one. Genesis 1:31. God saw all that he made, and behold, it was very good. So those three verses say, God is all. Everything was created through God, and it's good. Right? You with me? Now's when it gets confusing. John 8, verse 44, you are of your father the devil, and your will is to do your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning, and he has nothing to do with the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks out of his own character, for he is a liar and the father of lies. So now we're introducing a complete and total opposite concept that kind of gets confusing. And when you're confused, you lose your power. You lose your power to really act in a specific way because you're torn. Corinthians. And no wonder, for even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. And then this one's my favorite. I'm going to read it very slowly so you just get why it hits me. The God of peace will soon crush Satan. So we know that that's not how Jesus operated, right? Jesus didn't operate by crushing his enemies. He turned the other cheek, didn't he? But the final, verse from Matthew is really what it's all about. But I say to you, love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. That is the gospel in a sentence. Right?
Right.
But how hard is that to do? When was the last time you woke up and said, I'm going to love my enemies today? It's hard to do. It's really probably the hardest teaching, and it's extraordinarily hard to do. And it almost doesn't make sense. Right? How am I going to be loving Putin right now? You see what he's doing? I mean, there's evil deeds happening. But I'll explain the difference between evil and evil deeds. But there's very clear stuff happening here that makes you not want to love somebody. But as we go through this talk, I hope you'll flip a switch there somehow. Because that's what we need right now. That is what we need right now. Next slide, please. So basically, everything we've been taught, if you've been raised in formal religion, everything we've been taught has set up this epic battle between good and evil. That is the foundation of our thinking. That's the foundation of our feeling nature. We tend to perceive the world as an epic battle between good and evil. So, is it any surprise to anyone that our collective experience and our collective creation is an epic battle between what we call good and evil? And it depends on which side of the fence you're on as to who's good and who's evil, because everybody thinks they're the good ones. Everyone does. They think they're fighting evil. And it's always been that way. Them. The world would be a better place if it wasn't for them. So, I feel justified, based on my training and my teachings and my Bible and my God, to go out and commit genocide. This is what's happened forever. The Christians, when they were doing all that they were doing back in the day, it's been going on for years and years and years when people have been killing in God's name. It happens in the Middle East. It's happening everywhere. Killing in God's name. Because the minute you call them, and then you attach the name evil to it, you're justified. The world joins you and says you did good. And we end up with a world that is just completely opposite of what Jesus' teachings were. That was not how he operated. He didn't. It's not his style. Next slide, please. So here's what I'm going to do. You saw that I put on the, go to the previous slide for a second. I got a little carried away with myself. So it's this concept of duality, right? And so it makes sense to kind of think, well, sure, everything in the world is duality. And you see these examples in nature, right? Light versus dark, cold and hot. There seems to be this polar opposites of everything. But I'm going to unpack that concept a little bit and try to help everyone understand the difference. Yes, dark exists. Yes, light exists. Cold exists. Hot exists. Evil exists. Good exists. But I'm going to try to unpack the how and the why and the what do we do with this part. So now we can go to the next slide. And I want to talk about source energy. We kind of, we don't anthropomorphize God. God's not a person. God's an energy, right? So, and we believe that is the source. That is the source of all that is and all that's good. It's the creative energy. It's the love energy that flows through us. We have access to that, right? So that's kind of where we're coming from here. And But if you want to really go into nature and see if you can justify the fact that there really is no source energy for evil, we'll go down this road. The sources of light in nature are sun, stars, fire, and electricity in storms. Those are nature's sources of light. Now, as humans, we are also co-creators, and we've created our own sources of light bulbs, etc. We've joined in. But nature, as provided by our Creator, these are the sources of light. Okay? Now, the next side is the sources of dark. You're looking at it. No, go back. Look at that blank screen. Because these are the sources of darkness in nature. There are no sources of darkness in nature. There's nothing creating darkness. Darkness is simply, and you look it up, it's the absence of light. That's what it is. There's no source. And this is important. It's very important when you approach good and evil. Let's go to the next slide now, and you'll see it's the same thing with heat. Solar energy, geothermal energy, chemical reactions, and decay are the only sources that nature provides of heat. And again, we're co-creators, and we've created many of our own heat sources as well. But we'll move to the next slide and take a look at the sources of cold in nature. There's no definition for a source of cold. It's just the absence of heat. That's what it is. That's the scientific definition of it. So there's the source, and then there's the absence of the source. Okay? And the next slide tries to put this in context of good versus evil. So we have a lot of different religions and philosophies and spirituality ways to express what we think the source of good is. I think God is simple enough, but there's many, many ways that people all around the world have acknowledged that there is something that is just the source of good, this creator of all that is. And they name it different things, and they call it different things, and they pray in different ways about it. But everyone, to some degree or another, has acknowledged that there is something much bigger than us that's moving through us, through nature, through people, through every living thing, always for the purpose of good. So the next slide is what I would say the sources of evil in nature. And this is where I'll kind of hang my hat and just make the point that when you see evil behavior, it's not that there's an entity or an energy that's trying to drive that. We've made that up. We've made that up. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense in nature, and it doesn't make sense here either. There is not a source. Remember Flip Wilson, Devil Made Me Do It? We can't get away with that one anymore. We have to take ownership for our own behavior. And we have to take ownership for our own actions. And we can't call it evil, and we can't put a devil's face on it. And then, because that justifies us going out and killing them. Right? It's a justifiable reaction to evil. So we kind of have to, it's really hard to get rid of this. It's taken me years to get rid of my upbringing to where it's good versus evil. But I refuse to live in an epic battle of good versus evil. I refuse. So I continue to work on this simple first principle of unity. That one alone will change your life. If you really get it, and you really live it, and you really understand it, and then you really take the time when you're watching the news, or when you're expressing yourself, or when you're having a bad day, or when you're in an argument, to just peel this back and understand that source energy is ever present, and some people are open to it, and some people are closed to it. Some people have that light, and some people are in the dark. Some people are, so it's not about light and dark, it's about your relationship to the source that creates the world inside you, and then the world inside you is what creates the world around you. And collectively, that has a lot of power. When you have the whole world thinking the same way about the same thing, you see the creation of that, and we see it every day. Let's look at the next slide. Okay, so this is one of my favorite analogies from nature again. We know what happens every day. Like clockwork, you could literally go on Google and figure out exactly what time that sun's going to rise tomorrow, because it's unfailing. And then, but go on Google and look up, when does the anti-sun rise? Look up that one. You'll get a very weird little list of things, and it'll take you down some rabbit holes, I'm sure. You get my point, right? That's not what happens at night. The anti-sun doesn't rise and cast darkness at night. The sun wakes up and casts light all day, and then at night it's casting light somewhere else while we experience dark. And then it comes back every day like clockwork. So too is good versus evil. So too is life. It's all about our relationship with the one source that there is, which in this analogy is the sun. You can move on to the next one. So I'm going to really hammer this home now. I'm going to hammer it home. This is a joyful slide. Much better than the arm wrestling one, right? This Char's like, I hate that one. This is a nursery, obviously. Okay. So I would like for the first person who can get this, please find the evil one. See if you can find the evil baby. Go ahead. Why do I put that up there? Because some of us believe that people are just born evil. No. Look what people are born. Now, in everyone's life, things happen, right? They grow up, things happen. And they look at a baby, up until the age of 2 or 3, 100% connected with source energy. They don't even know there's anything but source energy. They're just little gods in action. Until something happens. And then they get a little closed off. Or they get a little, they put a boundary up around themselves. They begin to, move to the next slide. All right, this is out of order, so go one slide ahead, and we're going to go here. They begin to shut the valve. I'm a simple person. Plumbing works for me. I understand plumbing. So if there is a place within us that is open to receiving source energy, right? We're open to it because we believe in our hearts that the world is good, that life is good, that God is good. And we allow ourselves to be vulnerable enough to open that faucet. That's where the water of life comes through us. But these little babies, something happens along the line with some of them where they just shut that off, right? And the minute they shut that off, I promise you, what they're going to manifest in life looks evil to us because they're no longer source energy. But everyone needs source energy desperately. You can't survive without it. So the people that have shut themselves off to that want yours. They want yours. They want yours. They want yours. They're like vampires. These are spiritual vampires in life. You've been around them. You know who they are. You've probably gotten smart enough to kind of cut them off now, right? And you stopped handing them a straw a long time ago, I would hope. If you haven't, let's talk, because it's time to take that straw away. That's your source energy. They need their own from their own place. That faucet's shut, okay? And that's where the birth of what we call evil is. There is no Satan making this happen. The devil didn't make me do it. It's a choice that people have made along the way. And some people have horrible, horrible, horrible stories. And I have empathy for them. I really do. When you start to hear the stories, you have empathy. But their manifestations and their actions can be really hard to look at and really hard to accept in your life. And the changes have to come through them. But what could we do to a room that is dark? What do we do when we walk in a dark room?
Turn the light on.
Thank you.
Trip.
What is it? What was that?
Trip.
Trip. I've done that myself. You always do make a bold entrance, Christine.
That's her superpower.
That's your superpower, yeah. But it's true. You walk into a dark room, you don't fight the darkness. You turn on the light. You walk into a cold room, you don't fight the cold. You turn on the heat, right?
Right.
So it's the same thing with people. What does someone that has no lover in their life need?
Love.
Love. That's what they need. That's what Jesus was trying to say. Love them. Why? Because they need it. Because they don't have any. So that's what we could actually do to help. We could actually love our enemy. It's hard to do. Trust me. I'm from Jersey. That is not how I grew up. That is not how I grew up. And those instincts are still there. Believe me. But then I calm down and I take a breath and I realize, oh, this so-and-so needs a little love right now. I'm going to give them the best kind of love I have at the moment, which might be just to walk away. I'm loving you right now by walking away. And that might be the best you have in any given moment, but it's still better than the alternative. Because just imagine yourself walking into a dark room and swinging away at the darkness to try to get light. Right? Imagine that, how silly that is. And that's the world we're in. So let's go backwards a slide. And I want to just elaborate a little bit on who they are. They're created by God, right? The very first verse that I read said that God created all that is. So them are created by God. They're loved by God. They're entitled to their own opinions just like us. They're suffering their own pains and dramas just like us. They're sometimes lost just like us. They're sometimes filled with hatred just like us. They're experiencing strong emotions just like us. They're thinking the same bad thoughts about us that we're thinking about them. They're struggling to understand us. And they're good people just like us. Perhaps having bad behaviors and bad experiences. But at the core, go back to that little nursery. That's who you're dealing with. You're dealing with a grown version of that perfect God creature that's had the faucet turned off for way too long. So you can move forward. And one more. There we go. So no one said it better than Martin Luther King. God, we could use him now, right? But nobody said it better. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. That's what is needed in this crazy time. And then we'll just move to the next slide and just reiterate our first principle. And it's amazing how long some of us have been in unity and how hard we're still just working on the first principle. The very first one. So that's where we're at now. What time is it?
It's 10 till.
Okay, so let's do meditation then. Let me just sing a little bit of this, and then we'll go into meditation. Make me a channel of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me bring your love. Where there is injury, your pardon, Lord. And where there's doubt, true faith in you. Make me a channel of your peace. Where there's despair in life, let me bring hope. Where there is darkness, only light. And where there's sadness, never joy. Master, grant that I may never seek so much to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love with all my soul. Make me a channel of your peace. It's in pardoning that we are pardoned, in giving to all men that we receive, and in dying that we're born to eternal life. Master, grant that I may never seek so much to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love with all my soul. Love with all my soul. So let's all go inward and really just first acknowledge that we have the ability to make a choice right now to be a channel of God's peace. We have the power to make a decision to turn on the faucet full throttle and just invite all of that source energy and joy and love into our hearts. Because no matter what's going on out there, no one can control our ability to control our thoughts. That is true freedom. Ability to make decisions and to align with the source of all that is. be aligned in a way that we provide that source energy to all that we interact with. To be able to give love even to those that we call our enemy. To give love to each and every being. To give love to ourselves. Just to be a pure, radiant channel of this love and peace. This is a choice. It's really not hard to do. We're all born with that innate ability to do that. There was a time in our lives where we didn't even have to think about it. We just were it. So maybe it's a good idea to just take ourselves back to that time of our lives where we didn't know any different. We didn't even know there was a faucet. It was just running constantly. And we just allowed it and let that joy be. Knowing that even the hardest of hearts, when they're around a little baby, they smile. Why is that? Because that's pure love. They finally experience a moment of just the pure love. It makes the hardest of hearts smile. But we can still do that. We can still be that as an adult. So let's just take a moment to just acknowledge that this is our choice. And I'm just encouraging everyone to make that choice today. Master, grant that I may never seek so much to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love with all my soul, loved with all my soul. Bring yourself back into this room.